Prior to this, concerns were raised over McCabe's impartiality working on such matters after it was revealed that his wife, Jill, received questionable donations during her failed bid for the Virginia State Senate back in 2015. The money came from the political organization of Virginia Governor and longtime Clinton ally Terry McAuliffe. Last night, two of the most prominent Republican senators in Washington telling Bret Baier they have serious concerns about Mr. McCabe and the handling of the Clinton investigation.
I have great respect for OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility, and they have found something grossly wrong. We've raised enough questions about him over a long period of time, and I suggested to certain people that he ought to have been fired just as soon as we got a new Attorney General.
Here's what I do know, that the FBI and the Department of Justice were corrupt, in my view, when it came to handling the email investigation of Clinton.
Grossly wrong were the words used by Chuck Grassley there, which led Jonathan Turley last night on the Fox News channel to say, you know, McCabe's worried about losing his pension. Maybe he should be more concerned about going to jail.
Yeah, it sounds like he might have even been extremely careless, to use another term we've all become very familiar with. Look, you have a situation here where we're well beyond coincidence. McCabe has had numerous instances that have come out in the public of either hedging towards Hillary, making decisions that seem to benefit one side of the political aisle. And if we're going to start playing the give the benefit of the doubt game, give someone a second chance, I think that we should probably ask General Michael Flynn what he thinks about somebody just getting a pass because overall they're a good guy. I think he might want to weigh in on that right now.
It's interesting, and now this deadline's quickly approaching, right, Harris? So 5 o'clock today, end of the business day. What will Attorney General Jeff Sessions decide?
So what's really interesting to me about this is the fact that this is not a political appointee. This is a civil servant. So when you say putting somebody's entire pension at risk, there is kind of a sliding scale and some stops and gaps and securities in for civil servants. So he may not lose all of it, but that battle is going to be fierce because there can be one. There can be an appellate process for that. Civil servant versus an appointee like a James Comey, this is going to be a different ride no matter what Sessions chooses to do.
That's true, and none of us have seen the internal report that the senators were talking about. We haven't seen the case laid out against him. We've just heard rumors about it, so it's hard for any of us to judge whether he should lose his pension or get a letter in his file. There are a variety of punishments people can get. None of us can fairly judge that, having not seen it. But you're also right, Harris, he can appeal. And so even though today would be his last day, he can appeal to the Attorney General. He can then appeal further. The question politically will be whether Jeff Sessions thinks this is worth it, particularly when President Trump has gone after Andy McCabe personally and made it look political.
He's in a tough spot,
He's
Lisa.
in a tough
But he
spot.
can't consider that. He can't consider that, though, right, Lisa?
Well, look, the reality is the firing is of the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. That is the recommendation. So clearly there was something wrong enough for them to make that recommendation. And why are we so concerned about his pension? If he did something wrong, he did something wrong. You know whose lives are also ruined for lying to the FBI? Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos. And quite frankly, anyone who's associated with the Trump orbit who has had to pay tens of thousands of dollars for legal defense with this investigation. And you know who else has lied to the FBI and gotten away with it? Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills. We know that they all lied, except for they're not in trouble. So clearly, unless you're associated with the Trump administration or the Trump campaign, then you're clear.
The fact that this is an internal report, to me, given that McCabe is a multi-decade-long FBI civil servant, means that he must have done some bad stuff. To Marie's point, we don't know the specifics yet, so it's a little tough for us to
Sarah
play
Sanders,
into.
White House press secretary, called him a bad actor.
No,
yesterday.
I'm sure it's bad. I'm just saying we don't know what degree or how bad it really goes. And I would also note that for those who are going to start playing the world's smallest violin for Andy McCabe, we've seen this with Comey. You'll see this with others as well. Comey, I think, just got a multi-million-dollar advance on a book. He's going to be lighting his cigars with $100 bills for the foreseeable future. McCabe is going to be fine. This is not a guy who, if he loses his pension, it's going to be the end of his ability to sustain himself.
Do you think, how bad would it have to be for the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility to make that recommendation?
How bad would the conduct have to be? Oh, it'd have to be egregious and clear. They would give the benefit of the doubt to somebody.
We know about those text messages, right? That did reveal evidence.
He was mentioned in those, but he wasn't like a bad actor in them, right? They may have additional.
And one can conclude that he did affect, indeed, the outcome of the investigation.
We have seen no evidence that his political leanings or his wife's political leanings impacted the outcome of the investigation. What Buck said is none of this can be coincidence now, and that may be your judgment, but we have to wait for evidence that the Hillary Clinton investigation was impacted by his political leanings. Now the political people in charge are aligned with Donald Trump.
But you would have to suspend reasonable doubt in that case. You'd have to put all these facts together and then walk away and just and bring in a non-sentient being to look at them
but you
and
can't
say
make
they're not
assumptions
connected.
without evidence. We can't do that.
I also think that, but he's a civil servant. So
Not
my
that it
point is,
impacted
wouldn't
the
the evidence have to be even stronger? Because we don't have a habit in this country of holding our government officials accountable. So if they want to hold this one accountable,
a lot of Americans.
One at a time.
I think a lot of Americans are sitting back and seeing what happened with Hillary Clinton and then seeing this intense focus on the Trump administration without evidence of any collusion that has surfaced, and saying that there's complete different double standards when it comes to the law.
Right,
and so I think with Andrew McCabe, once again, that would be proving that to be true.
That decision could come down any minute, can come down any hour.
Or not
before 5 o'clock, there could be no decision at all. What do you think happens, Bob?
If the misconduct is there, he should be fired, and I think he will be fired.
Yeah. All right, so 4 hours and 53 minutes.
Who's counting? We need one of those countdowns in our screen.
And then you know what? It's 5 o'clock before St. Patrick's Day.
It's
then
5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
all right,
different
we'll leave
subject.
it there. Democrat Connor Lamb's apparent victory in the Pennsylvania special election should have Democrats coming together in a happy dance, but it seems to be stoking the party's civil war between moderates and liberals, whether they can make peace before the midterms. And a new call for a second special counsel to look at the handling of the Russia probe before Robert Mueller came on board. A top Republican saying the mainstream media would be on the warpath if the shoe were on the other foot. We debate.
There was a dossier used by the FBI to get a FISA warrant, and the Republican Party paid a foreign agent to go to Russia to get information on Hillary Clinton, how they would be behaving today.
On Outnumbered, we come in with a Fox News alert. For the first time, a key group of Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee is seeking the appointment of a second special counsel to look into the alleged Obama-era abuse of government spying powers against the Trump campaign. They're calling for an independent investigator to work with the Justice Department's internal watchdog. And they stress this has nothing to do with special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Specifically, they're raising concerns over the FBI's reliance on that unverified dossier written by a former British spy, Christopher Steele, anti-Trump dossier, remember. And they want an impartial investigator to get involved since the top DOJ officials may also be implicated. Watch this.
They cannot be counted on to investigate themselves. I mean, it's kind of common sense.
The number 4 person in the Department of Justice, Bruce Orr's wife, worked for Fusion GPS. He had dozens of contacts with Mr. Steele, the informant the FBI was using on the payroll of the Democratic Party. There's no way in the world he should have interacted with Mr. Steele because his wife worked for the same organization. So somebody other than the people in charge today needs to look at what they did yesterday.
So as I listen, Buck, to Senator Grassley there, it takes me back to a tweet by the president who said we're going to need investigators to investigate the investigators.
When we look at the basis of a special counsel investigation, it's that there's some kind of a political consideration that would prevent the Department of Justice from doing what it normally does. It would be hard to think of a circumstance that more obviously calls for some additional outside process than looking at malfeasance within the DOJ itself. And we've seen so much of it now where they've already put some sanctions in place. They've taken some action. Clearly, there's been something wrong here at the top level. And that's something that needs to be looked at by people who are independent of the people that might have been involved in that very corrupt process.
All right, so you have that baseline, but you also have this part, Marie. Some of those people are gone, so the Inspector General won't have the reach or the scope to be able to go, and there's something like 22 people.
The question, though, they want looked at is really a question about the FISA process, how warrants are authorized for American citizens when they include foreign intelligence sources or reporting. Sure. So it's actually a question of oversight of the FISA process. And so I actually think that DOJ is the right and proper place to do that. I am confident that DOJ, if they find wrongdoing, like they apparently the FBI has done for Andy McCabe, this should be an example of how they can investigate themselves.
So what do you do about those people that the IG can't reach? read.
Well, in particular, well, I'd say two things. First, because these Republicans don't like that the FISA court approved this doesn't mean there's evidence of FISA wrongdoing. So a special counsel seems, and legal experts think it seems a step too far. Inspectors general can get to former employees. They cannot compel them, but having worked in the government, believe me, they can bring people back, and they do, and I've seen it happen.
But there's been a lot of slow rolling already.
They can do that, but it's, as you say, it's not on demand. I mean, they don't have the position to go after these people.
But the question is really the FISA court. It's not these former DOJ officials. It's whether the FISA court improperly approved these applications.
Okay, we got it.
But we should be also looking at the FISA court as well, because if the unverified dossier put together by someone who is not credible, Christopher Steele, someone who lied to the FBI himself, speaking of people that lied to the FBI, who also in a British court said that he can't even defend some of the information in his dossier, that's a big, big problem if that was used to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on an American citizen. And I also think that it's going to be more and more difficult to avoid a second special counsel if we keep having these credible actors come forward who are grossly concerned about the actions of the FBI and the DOJ. I mean, we're talking about people like Senator Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, and Cornyn. Lindsey Graham is typically hailed by the media as someone who is a reasonable Republican.
They're Republican politicians. They also have partisan aims here. We have to admit.
But is it not concerning that the media seems so unconcerned about potential abuse with the FBI, with the DOJ, or with the FISA warrant?
I want to get Sandra in here. You know, Sandra, as we look at this, there is kind of a clear-cut line in terms of where the investigation's going. So what do you see?
Well, as far as the second special counsel is concerned, whether or not it's needed and whether or not that would ever actually be happening, I mean, are we, based on what you're seeing, Buck, is this a pipe dream? Is this actually going to happen?
I think it can happen. Certainly, there's a process in place for it to happen. And on the Steele dossier and the FISA court aspect of this, we have had months now of a lack of compliance from the folks involved with that. The DOJ has been slow rolling. They've been trying to hide information. Information has come out later. I think because at a minimum there's embarrassment. And now again, we're talking about the top reaches, people that have already been named in the press for being partisan one way or another. There's embarrassment about perhaps using this completely preposterous information to commit surveillance on Americans.
Some of it's been verified, by the way.
Some of it is still very much unverified, and the verified stuff comes from press reports. So I would hope that they wouldn't be running FISA just based on what a bunch of journalists say. But nonetheless, the fact that they've been unwilling to be forthcoming up to this point, to me, would justify an additional process. Look, there's a presidency at stake here. People need to understand that. And hiding behind secrecy and bureaucracy is not something that the American people are going to accept.
Can I ask, though, about that whole FISA situation? And Marie, we've talked about this for months now. Republicans had an opportunity to take a close look, particularly at Section 702, where you are looking in on foreign people here and possibly scooping up Americans, and how we deal with outing ourselves as Americans being spied on, and how you need a warrant to do that. It seems like there was a huge missed opportunity when it actually was on the floor, and Rand Paul was screaming as loud as anybody could, can you take a look at this? And now we're talking about it.
Because these Republicans know that FISA is a national security tool that has helped keep us safe. I think Buck would probably
Democrats know that, too.
Well, it doesn't mean it should be abused.
But there is zero evidence that these FISA warrants had anything inappropriate about how they were approved.
Oh, I think
there was information left out.
No, guys. The FISA court looked at multiple threads of information. They renewed it 3 times using other information.
We just need to see the applications ourselves.
Getting those declassified, as you know, is so hard to do.
If Carter Page says that he's okay with it, which he has, I wonder what then the process is.
But he's not what they're worried about. It's the way he was collected. If let's say we have a secret collection on a Russian, do we want to blow that source just so Carter Page feels better?
The way things are leaking, I'm not so sure we won't see a lot of it.
I think trying to get access to all the information about presidential communications during a primary or during a general campaign is something that actually would warrant breaking some of the old rules.
That's not what happened.
And maybe more people should care about it.
That is absolutely
That is a gross mischaracterization of what happened.
No.
Carter Page had a FISA warrant approved after he left the campaign because he was talking to Russians. And he was
So I've actually worked on, this is important. I've actually worked on the criminal side of this. And if they get access to Carter Page today, guess what? They have access to all of his electronic leading up to that point in time.
And he gave them a national security reason to be surveilled.
But don't pretend that it came after the fact and that didn't happen.
Period.
Sandra, I know one of the things you're always talking about with this is accountability. This really goes to the public's trust, too.
Yes, it does. And that brings up the question, will there ever be accountability and responsibility as a result of this? If these senators say that they're not getting the information that they need and the access to the people and information that they need, we need to listen to them, Maria.
Well, it's a Republican Department of Justice who's stonewalling them. It's their own party.
I thought these were civil servants without party or affiliation.
Jeff Sessions.
I knew he was
Jeff
going
Sessions.
there.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I can't
Jeff
figure it out.
Sessions is in
Depends on
charge of
the
the
day.
You look
DOJ.
beautiful in green today.
Jeff
by the way.
green
Sessions,
is
I don't
lovely,
need
I
to talk
agree.
about how I look. Jeff Sessions is in charge of the DOJ.
We'll do that 'cause we
He
have
is
to
a
move on.
partisan. Period. And you know
And
that.
I mean it. The president said if Robert Mueller ever began digging into his family businesses, that would be crossing a red line. Well, it's reportedly happening. So will the president respond? And what does this say about the scope of the investigation? And first, she praised Gina Haspel as deputy CIA director, but now Senator Dianne Feinstein is calling for Haspel's records. New questions about pressure from the Democrats' left wing when it comes to confirming the president's choices. Stay close.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein facing pressure from the left over President Trump's pick for CIA director. Initially, the senator seemed open to supporting Haspel, despite Haspel's involvement in the post-9/11 enhanced interrogation program for suspected terrorists. The senator saying, quote, "I've spent some time with her. We've had dinner together. We have talked. Everything I know is she has been a good deputy director. I think hopefully the entire organization learns something from the so-called enhanced interrogation program." Then Feinstein's top primary challenger, California State Senator Kevin DeLeon, slammed her position, saying, quote, "Feinstein knows better than most how morally and legally wrong torture is. This should be an easy call. I would vote no on confirming Gina Haspel if elected to represent California in the U.S. Senate." Now, Senator Feinstein is calling on the CIA to declassify documents detailing Haspel's role in the George W. Bush administration's interrogation and detention program. Buck, your thoughts?
Look, this is a very difficult debate, and it's an issue that people I know feel very strongly about. But the bottom line for me is that the new CIA director would have the support of the folks at Langley. She's a career officer. She understands the business very, very well. And I think that unless we're going to start looking back and reopening this chapter, relitigating this, which has already been done. We've already had the partisan Democrat Senate report on this. We've already had all these talks about it. You know, if you're going to hold her accountable for any alleged involvement in this, you'd have to also look and see, well, what other officers in the intelligence community should be held accountable? And now you're just reopening this entire situation. So I think it's just damaging and partisan. And I think she'd be a good director.
Lisa?
Well, you know who benefits from all of this? Mike Pompeo, because I don't think that Democrats are going to want two contentious confirmation proceedings. So I think Mike Pompeo, who otherwise might get some tough questions from Democrats, might get a little bit of a pass here with the focus on Gina. So I think she's obviously going to take a lot of heat during the confirmation process.
But I think, and she will have to answer the question, what if President Trump came to you and asked you to do this again, reopen this program? And from my experience, I don't know if you would agree, Buck, when we were at the agency, the people who were actually involved in this program are the last that want to go do it again because they saw how the political wind shifted. They saw how they've been blamed for so much. She will have to answer that question, and I fully believe she will be prepared to. You have Leon Panetta, John Brennan, Democratic CIA directors who support her. She was carrying out the policy of the United States government, whether or not we agree with it. But Buck's right. Are we going to go back and look at John Yoo, who did the legal guidance for it, who got to teach law at Berkeley?
And that's what she will say. She'll have,
agree on
I want to share this. So I interviewed Rand Paul right after the news conference that he gave the other day when he was really against Gina Haspel and said some things that others have said were not true. Liz Cheney then tweeted that video out and said, Gina Haspel has spent her career defending the American people and homeland. Rand Paul is defending and sympathizing with terrorists. These are her Twitter. This is Liz Cheney saying, no, you're not looking at this squarely. Now, we're not going to step into that battle, but it does speak to the issue that we have litigated this. We have talked about this politically, and if there is something to be said, Ms. Haspel will be, I'm sure, prepared to answer the question.
Exactly. And Rand Paul was wrong when he said, he was quoting from a source that said she oversaw the waterboarding of Abu Zubaydah, who was a key terrorist we arrested not long after 9/11. That's not true.
They retracted it officially.
They retracted it. ProPublica retracted it because it was not true. So Rand Paul needs to go back and look at some of his sourcing. She is a well-respected career officer who I think will be a very good CIA director.
Specifically, I think what Rand Paul said when he was speaking to you, Harris was that he had taken great concern with her expressing glee over the interrogation
and that's
then he had read that.
And that's been retracted.
So, but still, if he's still opposed to her, as well as John McCain
and several others, by the way,
she's going to need Democratic support for this to go through. What ultimately comes out of this, Lisa?
Well, I think she is best served by not relitigating this issue and simply saying that she was following the directives at the time and she would follow the directives now as CIA director. And so I just think she's best served not to get into a conversation about this. And just, I don't think she needs to relitigate it either.
The agency, the intelligence community, they were acting with a backdrop
in compliance with the law at the time,
but also that we don't want more buildings getting hit by airplanes. It was a particular moment in time when there was a tremendous amount of understandable anxiety. The threat level was through the roof, and they were doing what they thought they needed to do to keep Americans safe. After we had just lost 3,000 of our own. So it's very easy to look back at this and say, how could anyone ever think this would be a good idea? The reality is that at the time, people did what they thought
and
they had to do.
They were taking orders, and they were doing what they were being told to do, which is what I said to Senator Rand Paul. I was trying to dig deeper to understand.
And there were
really
limitations and there were legal opinions on this.
But I get it from him and McCain and others when you talk about what it feels like. And I mean, this is their pushback on it. But as far as Gina Haspel is concerned, you know, I hear a Democrat on our couch saying, yeah, you support her.
And I do. And I think that she will get Democratic support. And not just because a lot of Democratic senators are in tough re-election races. I know it's often why we talk about why Democrats might vote with the president. I think it's because, you know, when Leon Panetta, who is not a moderate, right? He's pretty liberal. When he comes out and says he supports her, I think you will get people like Mark Warner on the Intel Committee who understands the threat.
You do have those Democrats who just want to go against the president.
At those hearings,
it's like the president, I'm giving away cupcakes. No, we hate cupcakes.
Or they want to relitigate
but also,
this issue.
remember, Rex Tillerson was apparently the Russian-approved nominee, and then now when he's fired, it's because President Trump is with Russia and Putin. So you can't really have it both ways. You're right, Harris. They want to just go after President Trump.
You had the knee-jerk situation of when Pompeo is the new guy. People are saying, oh, well, will he criticize Russia? And they realize, actually, he criticized him basically the day before he was appointed.
And some 43 Democrats confirmed him in his current job.
Yeah, so he's more than qualified. I think he's going to be great.
New developments now. Speaking of Russia and the Russia probe, Special Counsel Robert Mueller reportedly has issued subpoenas to the Trump Organization for documents, some relating to Russia and to Mr. Trump's, and I say Mr. Trump because then candidate Trump's businesses. That would appear to come awfully close to a red line that the president said had set about not going into his family's finances. The White House is telling Fox News they were surprised at the reporting and that the president's family business has been turning over documents for some time now. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, when pressed on whether the president's red line was crossed, this is what she said.
As the president has said numerous times, there was no collusion between the campaign and Russia. For specific questions regarding the Trump Organization, I would refer you to them.
Red line crossed, and what do you do?
Well, depending on how you see this whole situation, I think this affects very much whether you believe that this is in response to the Trump Organization or Trump not getting documents fast enough, or is this just the rogue elephant of an investigation, once again trampling over things and doing this really for the purpose of making it seem like there's not been a lot of responsiveness from the Trump side of things. This is the problem, though, from the get-go. They're not actually investigating a U.S.-based crime. They are investigating a concept. This is political. It has been partisan from the start, and that's why I think the Mueller probe is fatally flawed as an investigation.
And it just seems like it continues to widen. I mean, you've got House Republicans saying closed case, no collusion. The Mueller probe, there's speculation it's coming to an end, it's in the middle. It just looks like it's just getting going when you see that.
That's how special counsels work. And all of us who lived through Ken Starr understand that it happens to both parties. This is what happens when you do things that warrant a special counsel. There are serious questions that the Mueller team is tasked with answering. And I think that they are going to do everything they can to get to the bottom of this. At the end of the day, if they find nothing, they find nothing. But it is worth asking the question about who was working with the Russians and whether that impacted the outcome of the election.
Lisa?
That's a fair question to ask.
I think most people were under the understanding that this was supposed to be looking at potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. And the only people that have been indicted over collusion have been Russians themselves. And we know that Hillary Clinton
They're
and
not
her
coming
team.
here. Putin's not handing
Well,
it
we know
over.
that Hillary Clinton and her team, 24 hours after losing, came together and said, let's look at Russia and blame this thing on Russia. They're the ones that funded the dossier, which helped fuel this entire narrative about Russia. And all the media cares about are things that we have no evidence of, yet they continue to ignore things like Peter Strzok and the exchange between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, things with Andrew McCabe, actual things that we have knowledge of.
I know that Hillary Clinton has been rather distracting for Democrats this week in terms of what she's been saying while she's
Not
in
for
India.
me, really.
So, but is it time to pull her into the investigation? Do you think Mueller will go there?
Well, I don't think there's any way that the American people, or at least people who don't believe that this has been a fair shake for Trump, are going to look at what's happened with Hillary and not take away from it that you've seen completely polar opposite ends of how the DOJ and how the Justice Department can treat people based on partisan affiliation. Yeah, I think people do want to have a full-on look. We should do a top-to-bottom scrub of what happened in the Hillary email investigation, what happened with the Clinton Foundation in the run-up to
But
this.
specific to Russia, though, and the dossier.
The dossier.
I mean, you don't even have to go. You could go there, according to Marie, and then branch out in 9 different directions if you wanted to.
We know for a fact that the Clinton campaign, you can say it was indirect, paid for information from a foreigner, by the way, who was using Russian sources, and that was specifically part of an attempt to get information to derail a presidency. So that is
very different than Russian government activity, intrusions into our
Well, let's look at it and find out.
Let me finish. But so the fact that the Russians hacked into emails and released them has also been proven.
Well, then let's look at it and see.
That is very different than a foreign adversary hacking into our systems and releasing things for political purposes. You know that is very different. And multiple people with the Trump organization met with Russians.
How about paying for that? That's political too. Let's follow that. Let's bring in the FISA court judges and see what they say about that.
Multiple members of the Trump campaign, met with Russian officials and talked about Hillary's emails and the fact that they had them and when they were going to release them.
Are you concerned about Hillary Clinton and the DNC paying those individuals for information?
That's not who they pay.
That's what it's been alleged, that there's Kremlin
mixing up
batch sources from Christopher Steele obtaining that information.
You're mixing up all of
I'm
this
not, Marie.
stuff,
You seem
Lisa.
absolutely unconcerned about any other aspect of this besides something that there's no evidence of. Even Adam Schiff, when pressed in interviews, is unable to come up with any sort of concrete evidence of collusion. We're talking about a president who's essentially been robbed of his first year in office.
Where's their
yes,
concrete
it is.
evidence of
Or
collusion?
has essentially been robbed of his first year of office and the approval ratings as well.
I'm sorry, Sandra. Sandra, ask your question.
That's not true to Lisa when she said there's no concrete evidence.
That's not what Adam Schiff has said. She quoted Adam Schiff, and that's not what he
I'm
said.
saying I've seen interviews with him where he has been unable
let me ask you a question.
to come up with definitive evidence of collusion.
Are you concerned that the Trump campaign met with Russians who told them they had stolen Hillary's emails and were going to release them to help them?
Are you concerned?
No. Answer my question. Don't ask another one. Answer my question.
Ooh, okay. Are you Harris Faulkner?
Buck, do you want to intervene?
Well, no. If you don't have an answer to that question, you prove my point.
The problem is, actually, I think this is instructive because if people keep arguing different parts of what is a vast series of interconnected events on both sides of the political aisle here, you're never going to get anywhere. You have to focus in on one thing at a time. And the fact of the matter is that the dossier is dodgy. It was used in this process. That was the subject matter we were discussing.
Okay, I'm holding all of you for aftercare.
There you go.
Okay, we're going to have an after session because we got to move on. Woo! Democrats may be, you can tell I'm a mom. Aftercare.
You're welcome.
All right. Democrats may be breathing a sigh of relief. You okay, Sandra? Okay. After their candidate Conor Lamb declared victory in the Pennsylvania special election. But the party is facing a growing battle over whether to embrace Lamb's centrist message and sometimes even to the right. Would such a move cause liberal voters to revolt? We'll debate that too. Warm and fuzzy, come back.
Just take a deep breath.
Conor Connor Lamb's apparent upset victory in Pennsylvania's special election has Democrats celebrating, but Politico reports that it's also fanning the flames of an ongoing civil war between party liberals and moderates, amid questions over whether other Democrats should embrace Lamb's more centrist strategy. One top Blue Dog Democratic congressman saying, quote, Connor Lamb didn't run on an identity politics, one-size-fits-all message. He ran on the Blue Dog message. But a top Congressional Progressive Caucus member warning, quote, people who say this is all the direction all of us should take are kind of missing where the energy is coming from. That Democrat mentioning that issues like universal health care, raising the minimum wage, and regulating Wall Street are important to base voters. Buck, we are every day inching closer to this midterm election, and Democrats are enthusiastic about progressive candidates and moderate candidates. Should the Republicans be worried after this Pennsylvania race?
I don't think they should be worried. I think that it's nice that Democrats finally have something to maybe look forward to on the electoral front after the recent years that they've had.
I'm ready.
There's so much shade in that.
Lamb was a wolf in Republican clothing, if you will. He was a guy who was presenting himself. That didn't really work, but you know what I mean?
I got it. We all looked at each other and thought,
like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was close. It's almost St.
No, but
Patty's
the president
Day.
called him Lamb the Sham, and that's
there you
what
go.
you're getting to.
He's going to vote with Democrats.
That is actually
We won't vote. We were putting down.
I'm not as good at this as
Don't you
Trump.
think
Trump is better at the insults.
Lamb is going to vote with the Democratic caucus?
No, I think that Lamb is, in places like Western Pennsylvania, a good prototype for what Democrats should do, which is basically be as close to a moderate Republican as possible. And he was also just a particularly
Voters are so smart. They knew two things about Pennsylvania District 18, primarily because we've been talking about it for a while, and I see it in social media. But I think just leaving their, local politics, they know that they're going to see some redistricting in that state.
A new district.
A completely new
district.
Right? Okay, and when that happens, then you got to take a look at the Democrats who are in there. And are they going to be, because you could make the argument that maybe some Republicans voted for Lamb too to get to some of the,
Absolutely.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But are they going to be as centrist as he is, or are they going to be kind of the normal liberal that we see, in which case he'll get primaried off the stage. But the other thing that they know is that the Democrats are not going to go looking for pro-life, pro-tariff, pro-guns. They're not going to go looking for those people in certain corners of the country because they can't win with that. They can't fundraise for that.
Lamb is personally, he says, opposed.
And
to
how is he going to vote?
He's saying that he would
Let me
vote
ask you how
for
he
anyone.
votes.
That's what I'm saying.
Murray, what part is Nancy Pelosi going to play in future races as we look towards midterms? Is she going to be